Hi, everyone. Thanks for your patience.
Oh, muted.
Are we still muted? Yeah, okay,
You may
we're
need to
good.
get
All
closer.
right. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming out for Lillian Luft's residency talk. We've got a nice group of people here in the studio. We've got some folks online, and obviously we've got folks in the future who will be joining us by watching on YouTube. So glad you are all here. I'm Shane Prada. I'm the director here at the Baltimore Jewelry Center. I'm just going to give a quick introduction to Lily and then turn it over to her. Lillian Luft is a multidisciplinary craft artist based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, who crafts precious objects and jewelry. Her work centers her personal history and her deep engagement with the materials and histories that impact her life. Luft leverages the inherent qualities and cultural weight of the materials she works with to make objects that subvert common expectations and encourage unexpected behaviors. Very proud of myself for being able to say Luft leverages. Lillian graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee with a BFA and a focus in jewelry and metalsmithing in 2022. She maintains a studio at Milwaukee's House of Rad. Her work has been exhibited in national and juried exhibitions, including Dream Machine at New York City Jewelry Week. And in 2022, she was the recipient of the Windgate-Lamar Fellowship Grant from the Center for Craft. In addition to her art practice, Lily works as a 3D modeling and manufacturing consultant. And in her free time, she volunteers with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources with their muscle monitoring program. This work plays heavily into her art practice, as you will see in her presentation. It's been really lovely to host Lily over the last month. She's been such a kind and generous presence in our studio, and we've all been quite fascinated by her process and what she has created. I'll turn it over.
All right, thank you, Shane. All right. So I'm gonna start by sharing my screen really quick. Okay, just making sure that looks good. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you everybody who's here in person and online, and to Shane especially for that very kind introduction. I will say that my time here at the Baltimore Jewelry Center has really been something pretty special because everybody here has been so welcoming right back at me. The people here are really doing something cool, and if you can, I'd really suggest that you come and see it. As you know by now, looking at this, my name is Lily, and I'm going to kick this off with a little bit of background about myself and a quick chronological run through some of my older work that's informed the work I've been doing here in Baltimore before jumping into what exactly I've been up to. So, while I'm currently based in Milwaukee, I grew up jumping between this city, Phoenix, Arizona, and small town Michigan. I'd fly back and forth between those two spaces a couple times per year. And because of that, and my own interest at the time in rocks and minerals, because I was a nerd kid, I did become that kid who always has rocks in my pockets. I'd pick up rocks and nails and things that I really should not be carrying around. And that sort of sentimental interest in materials and the small objects that surround me and their, histories and the memories that I put into them and that the people around me put into them is something that I really carry with me to this day. These kinds of attachments between materials and me and materials and their histories is a major part of what drives my work today. And just as a side note, I don't know what I'm mad about in that photo. Jumping ahead a bit, I attended the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee for my undergraduate degree, like Shane said, studying jewelry and metalsmithing. A sort of key part of that was that I was working full-time and going to school half-time. That left me with a lot of time to be able to do things that I otherwise would not. Great example of this was that I was one of several studio assistants to Yevgenia Kaganovich, a handful of her projects over the course of 6 years, including Grow, a series of sculptural and jewelry works constructed from highly modified donated plastic bags, and her current work altering wood and living trees. Because I was attending part-time and working full-time, I got to do things on the side like this. I ran these sort of enormous CNC machines and built up a totally separate skill set from my jewelry and metalsmithing skills and the skills that I was building working with Yevgenia. These sort of side experiences were, machining and primarily working as an apprentice jeweler. They really informed the way that I think about processes and gave me a very separate tool set to call on when I need to.
Okay.
So jumping ahead again, this is some work that I finished around 2019. It's titled The Pearl Eater's Toolkit, and it's a long-term performance piece and a set of custom tools. It is almost exactly the size of a ream of paper. So that wooden box is about 3.5 by 9 by 12 inches. And this is what it looks like unpacked. So I constructed or cast or machined every single part of this except for that brown glass bottle and the glass sheet that you see over on the right. And taken as a set, these tools enable me to step into the role that I made for myself as a sort of metaphorical pearl eater. I use these tools to replicate my HRT pills that I would take every day out of crushed pearls stored in that small octagonal central container. This process, though a little bit complicated, took place in tandem with my actually taking the medication, lengthening it into a sort of elongated ritual and leaving behind this set of pearl-made pills that I would later string. So because I was taking that sort of simple action and expanding it into this extended thing taking place over many years, I really took the time to make the tools very well cared for and custom made for their function. The purpose here is to make this small action that I found myself overlooking frequently into something that was worthy of the value that it had in my life. And it was partially derived from this observation that I made early on in my transition that each individual pill of HRT cost almost the same for a similarly sized freshwater pearl, B grade, I think it was. So it's a sort of one-to-one comparison between the two materials. And in addition to that main tool set, I also made this separate tool set. These are steel, brass, gold, and oak. So while that work is what initially introduced me to working with pearl and mother of pearl, got me interested in what those materials lend to the objects that contain them, it was this piece that actually kind of led me to falling in love with it as a material. This piece is titled Longing's Choke, and it is a choker that was produced during the kind of deep, all-consuming isolation of the pandemic. And it has two totally distinct faces that can't be worn flipped. This one is a view out of every single window in my home in the dead of winter, and the other is that blank polished face that you were just looking at. This piece is sized for my neck specifically, and it can only be worn in its intended form as a choker when supported by my Adam's apple in the front of my body, with the blank face outward. This project is also sort of the point that I began to investigate artworks that engage in subtle actions on the wearer and on the wearer's environment. In this case, it literally and figuratively cuts me off from others through enforced silence, because the Adam's apple does move when you speak, and through the act of hiding the edges away against the skin. Jumping forward again to 2022, we get to some of my more recent work. At this point, I'm using mother of pearl in almost every piece that I'm making. This body of work really engaged heavily with my own past and my childhood through a set of around 100 childhood photos. These photos were given to me by my grandparents in 2021 when I came out to them. And while making these pieces, I attempted to renegotiate my own relationship with my pre-transition self, creating new narratives through the alteration of the actual image of me. So in some pieces like this, I'm engaging directly with the photos as objects, modifying them and using the mother of pearl itself to veil and obscure myself in the photograph. And a trend that you'll see increasingly here onwards is that I'm beginning to use the sort of form of common household objects and sort of sentimental talismans and ritual talismans as not so much stand-ins, but ways for me to sort of quietly put more information in the work. In this case, I was making an evil eye pendant or talisman, both symbolically and visually. The blue's enamel. This piece is enamel, freshwater, and saltwater mother of pearl, and silver, on also steel, excuse me. The primary body of the pendant is steel. So in addition to that, I was making sort of other objects that played with this idea of looking through materials, such as this locket, which is a translucent piece of mother of pearl on both sides, one engraved with a photo of my mother, and one with a photo of me. When closed, this locket can actually be seen through. It juxtaposes the images onto one another. In addition to that, it's designed sort of carefully and weighted to self-close when worn. And it's this sort of reframing by putting things next to each other of, I wanted to associate these memories that I have of my own childhood playing sports with the reality that my mom also played sports and I don't need to feel this way about them. And other pieces like this one, I've revised a family photo album and filled it with these sort of looking glass-like pieces of mother of pearl. These pieces can be peered through to remind the viewer of specific dates, places, and photos. This piece ends on a photo of my mom and a text at the end sort of reflecting on the reconstructed photo album that I've made here. And the sort of thing that I'm beginning to do here is both add new narratives to my life and then also remove narratives from my life. This is sort of the inverse of the photo album work. This object is made of pine rosin, and over time, that pine rosin flows at room temperature. It's a pretty precisely calibrated mix that flows over the course of about a month. These two photos are taken really close to a month apart, and over time, the visible raised image just sort of melts away to nothing, but it's happening at a speed that you can't track or see. And at this point, we've reached the start of the research that kicked off the body of work that I've been working on here. So this is also the point where I received the Windgate-Lamar Fellowship Grant from the Center for Craft and began looking into both the origins of the mother of pearl that I was using and learning a little bit more about scrimshaw, a practice that I was engaging with at the time through carving into mother of pearl sheets. Before we get into that, we're going to take a little bit of a detour because for about 2 years, I worked on projects other than this while I gathered research. While I was working on that project, everything that I did was really big for some reason. This project was one that I worked on with the Chipstone Foundation for the Milwaukee Art Museum. It is the actual construction of this room that holds an exhibition called Knowledge Beings of contemporary indigenous ceramics artwork. I also helped to found a gallery in Milwaukee quite recently. These are about 2 weeks apart, these two photos. So we went at quite a speed. And this is something that I'm obviously still involved with in the city. And then the other sort of thing that I've been doing is what Shane mentioned, which is doing CAD and manufacturing design for public artworks. This is a 20-foot by 20-foot by 6-foot pair of glasses in downtown Milwaukee. And all of these skills are sort of scaled up versions of the skills that I use to construct my own work. So at this point, we're getting into the stuff that I'm most excited to talk about probably, which is the work that I've been doing here. As I mentioned, it stems from my own interest in the materials that I work with, and it began from looking at scrimshaw. It's a process that involves scratching into usually whale's teeth, but also other materials such as bone, walrus ivory, and mother of pearl. It was done primarily by American whalers. And I became fascinated with the way that these whalers talked about their materials and why they were working the way that they worked. Um, as they were the closest ones to its point of origin, their artworks take on this unique relationship and character in relation to the animals that they were seeing while whaling. That interest was also being echoed in my own efforts to locate a sustainable source of mother of pearl. This is something that I had been importing from a source that I wasn't really able to identify the origin of to any real degree. And because I wasn't able to identify it or locate a better source or more ethical source, in the summer of 2022, I began volunteering as a mussel surveyor in Wisconsin in an attempt to get to know the material itself while I looked for a better source. Needless to say, this effort bore quite a lot of fruit. We'll see if this will load. Yes, good. These are 10 minutes worth of searching by one person in one river. So when doing surveys, we'd find around this many live mussels in your average watershed in Milwaukee, and then the same amount of dead shell. And those dead shells can stay in the river for up to a decade. And they're perfectly acceptable to take with some restrictions. So I'm frequently finding this usable shell material from already dead animals. And in that same effort that began as an attempt to get closer to the origin of the material I was working with, freshwater mother of pearl that I was importing, I found a sustainable source near me. And it was one that I could engage with while actually improving the mussel ecoculture in the region. And along the way, I found images and histories such as this. This is a thing that, we see images like this relatively frequently here in the US. This is at a mussel button making factory, probably in Illinois. So the sort of thing that all of this research and surveying led me to was that of the 300 species in the United States of mussels that were extant around 1890, as far as we can tell, around 32 of those have gone extinct due to actions just like this. So unfortunately, I'm working with some pretty fraught material in certain ways. So I've been taking quite a lot of care with how I actually handle this substance. So because the material that I'm gathering while survey forms the sort of baseline of the work I've been doing, the thing I've been trying to do is to maximize the amount of material I get out of each shell through a sort of collection of processes that take the material in and out of the digital realm. The first thing that I'm doing is actually scanning the shells with a 3D scanner. So what this lets me do then is I get to cut into them digitally and plan out the object that I want to make ahead of time, and then produce things like 3D printed dies that let me make those cuts accurately in, the real world without needing to rely on a machine at the same time. Sorry, excuse me. With this in mind, I can then model the outcome I want and work with 1 foot in and 1 foot out of that digital process. I can do things like print waxes, hand modify those waxes further after printing, make dies to drill very large numbers of holes very precisely, or make very precise cuts into a material while preserving other regions. And this is what allows me to make things like what's depicted here. Throat's a little dry. I'm going to take a quick drink. Sorry. So given that I, here in Baltimore, haven't had access to these digital processes, the thing that I did in preparation for coming here was to sort of pair a body of objects that I had already processed with that 1 foot in the digital to then reprocess with traditional metalsmithing tools. And I got to re-engage with a lot of processes that I've enjoyed in the past and just haven't had need or time to return to, and find a lot of love in them, as well as just ways to reapproach old objects that I wasn't sure how to work with. So, oh my gosh. So in my time here, I've done quite a lot of things to alter the objects that I showed in that earlier photo. Things like cutting apart pieces that I wasn't sure I knew how to work with anymore. Totally recontextualizing objects into new shapes and forms by juxtaposing and collaging them with other pieces. And printing, modifying, and casting settings for these pieces that I would otherwise just not be able to do in Milwaukee without access to casting. And now we can kind of circle back around to some finished work again. I have 2 finished pieces to show you, one of which is one of the pieces that I just showed you. This is the first of that series of objects to be finished. It's constructed from machine steel, silver, and shell, and it uses all of those processes that I've discussed in order to sort of prioritize the visual of the shell from all angles but one. The angle where you look at the shell and it's been perfectly flattened down into a tracing of a piece of a strand of pearls. Here it is from another angle, so you can kind of see all of the material of the shell being shown off here on the edges of the object. And on the flip side, not shown here, there are also the structure of the rear side of the shell is reproduced in steel. And this is a piece from another series of objects that I wasn't able to work on here in Baltimore because it's made entirely of lead. But I do want to end on this piece because it's an important part of the work that I'm doing. So the Smithsonian has a large collection of 3D scanned mussels of various species from regions all over the world. They make available for use by the public for any purpose. And as part of this work, I've also been engaging with archives of information about these animals. And the Smithsonian's archive contains around 19 currently extinct mussels that you can go and look at as 3D models. And the thing that this series of objects is doing is taking those and making them into now poisonous, delicate, and untouchable surfaces that reproduce not the shell, but the sort of hollow where the body of the mussel might go as a kind of memorial to these animals. And the reason that I want to sort of end on this note is that I really want to caution you against jumping into gathering your materials from your environment directly. Get involved with something that you care about, like what I do, and you'll find things that really surprise and inspire you. Thanks everyone for coming. All right. Well, I've been informed that it's time for questions. We do also have some objects from the work that I've been doing set up here in the back of the room. Do you want to show those off at all? Perfect. We can show those while we work on getting some questions in. So Jay's asked a question about how I sort of view and interact with the lifetime of the materials that I'm working with, both in my care and out of it. And just to kind of clarify really quick, are you talking about the work I've been doing here specifically or just in general? Shane.
I think here is
More relevant.
the other.
Yeah, totally. She's said both in case you can hear. The primary thing that I really am trying to do is be realistic about these materials. I don't usually work with materials that are very time durable, and this is largely because the shell that I'm working with is also not very time durable. Without a kind of extreme amount of care and isolation from certain environmental factors, it will expand and contract, crack itself, and degrade over time. And in response to that, I work with materials like steel that I really like to work with and which have similar lifespans. In my care, I can do things to extend those lifespans and also to allow that natural alteration and decay to sort of proceed on its own path and then correct as needed. A lot of my older steel work actually has rusted to a certain degree, and I have processes that I use to both make that rust more visible and repair it in the same action. So they sort of pick up the results of people touching them over time, something I want.
I have a follow-up question with that.
Yeah.
So when you're designing, are you designing with the decay and repairability in mind?
I'm gonna briefly unmute.
So in case you didn't hear, Mercury has asked if I'm designing with that sort of breakdown and decay in mind. And the answer is absolutely yes. Even in pieces that appear to not be deconstructible, I've designed them with methods to take them apart pretty easily. In some cases, I'm using things like hidden screws, and in others, I'm trying to work with sets of materials that can be repaired in the same way. In the case of the finished brooch up there, the one with the pink shell and all the beads, there's only 7 of those that are actually rivets. And all of those are riveted in a way that makes them easy to bend and remove the shell if needed. With that in mind, I can take it apart if I really need to. I don't ever want to, but I can.
There is a question from Evgenia. Hope I'm getting that name right. I love your work, by the way. Wonderful to see this work, Lily. Terrific talk. Can you tell us about your plans for your solo show coming up in January?
Yeah, thank you for the prompt. So this January in Wisconsin at the James Watrous Gallery in Madison, I do have a solo show there with 2 other people in sort of a split show, because we all make somewhat small work. This work is all going into that show along with a series of sculptures and the lead pieces that I've been working on in Milwaukee. I'm gonna take another quick drink of water. Wow, my throat is dry. But yeah, this is really my intention coming here was to finish as much of the work that is jewelry for that show as possible. And I do think that I'm well on my way toward that goal.
With this, so this cast piece,
Mm-hmm.
it didn't have this texture yesterday, did it?
No.
Okay. Yeah, it was like,
Thanks for noticing.
well, I think it was, Anna pointed it out, but I had seen
Go
it
for it.
yesterday. So what is,
In your practice, it seems like you're making is pretty significant as those means and then end.
can you start again? Sorry.
It seems like in your practice, making is really significant as both the means and then
Mhm.
and I'm wondering if yes, then maybe how you think about like that distinction between means and ends in your representation.
Are you asking specifically in relation to tool making or just in general?
I think tool making is where tool making is where tool making like it also seems very relevant to like your previous work your work in conservation, which I think might be though maybe much to like me as an art educator, maybe more important to you as a or the world as a place.
Yeah, certainly. And this is like, there's more to it than this. So I'm saying the fun part first. I make tools because I think it's fun. I love a little bit of overcomplication as a way to make a process more enjoyable that I don't like as much. And that often leads me down a path that is a little silly. More seriously though, I find that I'm often making objects that are tools no matter what they're doing. The jewelry object is a tool for wearing on the body for a specific outcome. And I know that that's a backwards way of thinking about it, but oftentimes I'm going to the end that I think suits the mean that I'm looking for. Like those lead pieces. I don't want you to be able to touch them. So they are made out of lead. Sort of working backwards to the outcome rather than forwards to it. I hope that answers sufficiently. Cool.
Okay.
Oh yeah, for sure.
I'm gonna switch it.
Yeah.
Close. And we do have a question from Pavanos. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that right. So cool to see your work. Mother of Pearl has been such an integral part of your practice for some time. Echoing. Do you see yourself continuing to work with it as closely after the solo show, or do you have new materials in mind?
That's a good question. I think it will be time for me to consider my relation to Mother of Pearl's material, but I don't really see myself stopping being close to it. I do surveys in part because it's important to me, and in part because I just like to do them. I think that being that close with an animal that produces a material that I like to work with will make me keep working with it, even if I don't want to. In sort of other turns, I've really enjoyed working with lead as much as it's kind of a miserable material in general. So there are probably other materials on my horizons, but I don't know what they are yet.
Question two. So obviously there's so many layers to your work between the tool making to the collection and execution and well, collection, designing, execution. And we spoke a little bit outside of this talk about the sort of archival methods you take to like archive your own work. And I would love if you would take a little bit of time to share some of those like archival efforts and like what you do and why.
Yeah. I'll work backwards on that. I'll work from the what to the why. So I keep a very large and maybe a little bit unreasonably thorough record of all the digital objects and physical objects that I'm making and the methods that I'm using to make them. As well as all of those scans of shells that I mentioned, I keep alongside all the tools that were used to modify them. And, you know, I have literally right here, actually, turning on my video for 1 second, sorry, Shane. I carry a 250 gigabyte drive with me all the time that is full to the brim with files. That I'm constantly moving on and off because I'm managing that archive of the tools that I've used and the projects that I'm working on. Realistically, my hope is that somebody else could go back through it and understand it as well as I do. I know that's not probably going to happen, But the purpose is really for me to be able to keep everything straight with all the tool making and modification that I have to do all the time to all of these files. I need systems, and so I've made them.
Such an important thing for you to be doing, for so many reasons, because you're not only like documenting through your work, like environmental issues that we're going through in this world, but also social issues that we're going through as well. And they are like, it's very culturally significant work, I would say. So
Yeah.
I think it's really amazing and important that you're building your own archive for such meaningful and important.
Thanks, Mercury.
Yeah. Totally.
Go for it.
You share your projects and process with this in secret.
In case you didn't hear, Cindy has asked if I've shared the projects that I'm working on with the conservation group that I'm part of. The answer to that is kind of. They know that I collect shells when I go out to do conservation work, and they have some idea of what I'm doing with them afterwards, due in part to the fact that I checked with all of them to make sure that doing this was okay. This is something that is, you know, in a very real way, you can't tell if a shell that's been modified after it was taken out of the river was taken out of the river alive or dead. So I need to be really careful about how and when I'm doing that, and keep really good visibility on exactly which shells I'm working with for their purposes and to, you know, keep myself safe.
Yeah, I think that's because I think really interesting and there are opportunities for like, you know, artists like you that have this really strong sort of investment in consultancy, you know, and sort of thinking about your environment and how to actually interact with that in like an actually sustainable way. When there are opportunities for that to intersect with actual like folks who are doing that work in a different field, in a different way.
Yeah.
Because the audience is different, right? And people who are coming out to view your exhibition, they're probably gonna be artists like us, you know? So sharing this with scientists or, you know, other people who are in that organization and bringing them out to the gallery and how to interact with your way of thinking and your perspective on this type of, you know, topic.
Yeah, it's something that I'm interested in doing. For that solo show coming up, I'm talking with the gallery that's running that to hopefully, fingers crossed, get somebody from the muscle laundering program to come and talk about the program at the show. We'll see if that can actually happen because the person who would do it is very, very, very busy. What was that? I'm going to. I'll invite her to come, but it's more a matter of like, does she have the time at a time when people will come to hear her talk?
Oh, I felt like everyone here.
Oh, yes, of course. Yeah. Any other questions from the room?
Yeah, one. Lily, did you know that residencies like yours are made entirely possible by donation?
Are they really?
And that we're in the home stretch of our summer fundraiser.
It's true. We're just under $1,500 from meeting it by by midnight on Tuesday. So we have about what's that, 5 more days?
So if you wanna help make great residencies like Lily's possible, you can make that happen at baltimoreJewelryCenter.org/donate.
I actually put it in the chat on time this time. Bravo. Lily, thank you so much. Good
Yeah,
job.
of course.
It's